So this is going to be episode 3, speaking with Christina, who is an Army veteran. And this is a very important topic because it's not a new topic, but it is an important topic. It needs to be exposed. It's very far-reaching, and it kind of highlights exactly the problems that many people have, especially women, when it comes to serving and then trying to find any sort of support when they get out. So unfortunately, the VA does not bias against male or female, but it does not paint a pretty picture. So we'll say good morning, Christina.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thank you for participating. It's a very important story, which is why I wanted to make it the first interview podcast. So what year did you enter the military?
2002.
And what was your MOS? When, for those that don't know what MOS is, what was your job in the Army?
A 92 Golf, which is a cook.
Okay, so a lot of people may think that cooks do not face any sort of imminent danger, but everybody needs to remember that cooks deploy as well, and just because they may not be front lines pulling the trigger, they are under attack when they are on base, when they're deployed overseas. So do not ever think that there are little jobs in the military, because each job has their own level of danger. So Christina, if you would, please briefly describe what you experienced. You're from when you started having problems till when you got out.
I deployed to Balad. I went through Iraq, obviously, on the Kuwaiti side. And while we were in Kuwait, had a lot of alerts because of gas in the area. So we put on our mop gear probably 14 times while we were in Kuwait. We crossed into Iraq. We went through Baghdad and got to Balad. I was with my unit. We were an aviation brigade out of Kielstadt, Germany. It was 12th Combat Aviation Brigade. I think my first injury happened in June of 2003. Unclear if it was mortar attack or just a malfunction in the equipment, but the immersion heater that I was working on, it blew up. And I remember falling, and our living quarters were down in a hill. And I remember my first sergeant was running up the hill. I have no recollection of how I got off the flight line or even seeing the doctor. I was put on modified duty briefly, and that just consisted of no PT. Then I went on leave. I came back, and I was having a reaction to the malaria medication that they had me on.
And that malaria medication was the mefloquine, right?
The mefloquine actually replaced the doxycycline, I think.
Okay.
So it replaced that. So I took one pill every week, 250 milligrams for the remainder of my deployment. I didn't know about the black box warning. They don't tell you things like that. You just get what they give you and you take it, or you'll get in trouble. It's disobeying a lawful order. That's how they class it. So I took it, and it was shortly after that I was given an Article 15, a field grade, for assaulting another soldier. The soldier and I had made amends. He admitted to his part, and I did tell him that if I could go back and redo it, I would have done it different. I told him about the extenuating circumstances that were involved. Things that I didn't know while I was in the military that I didn't learn until much later, like the mefloquine. Even then, the Department of Defense said, do not give this to soldiers who may or have documented a traumatic brain injury. That includes explosions, head trauma, anything.
Which is important to note, because being so close to the explosion, and just to update anybody who's listening, the traumatic brain injury was not even a blip on any radar when you had head trauma, and it didn't come to the forefront until many years later. So a lot of us who did succumb to head injuries, it was just, okay, so we're going to give you some rest and relaxation and then move on, without even a thought of the possible outcome of effects that it may have on you. So you already had the traumatic brain injury prior to changing over to mefloquine, which is the malaria medication, which they're now finding, with more research coming, the possible effects that it's had. So that could be a huge contributing factor to the decisions you made and how you felt and how you responded to certain events.
Yes, sir. That is correct. I requested a hearing with my commanding officer. He was battalion level lieutenant colonel. And I never brought up about the mefloquine because I didn't know to. And so in Iraq, Afghanistan, or anywhere our troops are deployed, there are these things called incident reports. The incident reports are supposed to go into the Department of Defense's database. They often turn those over to the VA for adjudication of benefits. If the soldier says, I was shot, they have the scar, but their commander didn't put in that form that's required, then he's going to have to fight that much harder to prove that he was actually shot downrange. So it goes back to the incident reports. That incident report was never put in my file. And the ABCMR had also documented that many of my files were missing. The Department of Veterans Affairs also said the same thing. So I took my punishment, and it was 45 days extra duty and 30 days restricted, which means that I had to stay on base. I wasn't allowed to PX. I wasn't allowed anywhere but staying in my general area. For the first 40 days, I really did burn the candle at both ends. Being a cook, I didn't really cook downrange. Probably starting in May, we had civilian contractors come. They had the equipment, they had real food and everything. So I would get up 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would go drive to get chow for my battalion. I'd load it up, come back, and then I would set it up. And then people would eat. Then they would go do their PT, or they had already done PT, take their showers, report for their duty in Iraq. I would take it down, and then I'd drive it back. Then I was in charge of burning human waste because I was junior enlisted. And so I did that also. Then after I did everything that my command wanted me to do, I would report to Command Sergeant Major Buddy Wallace. He was in charge of my extra duty. And for the first 40 days, he had me doing the most horrible things. There's nothing in the UCMJ that gives, restriction on what they're allowed to give soldiers to do for extra duty.
Right.
So I swept the flight line about 5 miles. I built a fence, a wooden fence. I dug the holes, put the put the post in, connected it all the way across. I tore down structures, picked up these huge folding rocks. I had to dig my own pit to put the rocks in. And then when I would get done, my command's like, well, sometimes it's 11 o'clock at night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and they're like, well, we need you to do this. Go stack those MRE boxes. I'm tired, but I'm not going to say anything because I know these people don't like me, and all it's going to do is make it worse. And so it was stacking MREs, it was cleaning, sweeping, whatever, because they said it wasn't fair to my squad that I got in trouble, and now I'm not there to complete the work. So on the 40th night, Sergeant Major Wallace was walking through the Haas, which is an aircraft covering that we built many, many years ago. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm cleaning out this freezer. Due to the condensation and the desert heat, it makes it freeze on the inside. So you have to scrape it out. And he's like, So he told me to stop, and I'm a nothing. And he's much higher ranking him, and I begged him. I said, please don't do anything, because they're going to get me if you say something. He's not listening to me. And he wakes up my command, and he's like, what the hell are you doing? You know she's not supposed to be working after extra duty. And so they got letters of reprimand, and they got in trouble. And then the next day, I did everything I was supposed to do, and I went and signed for my extra duty. And he told me to pick up the 2 rocks, put it in my pit. And I did. And he told me to go to sleep. And yeah, I went to sleep. The next 3 days, it was over. So after that, things kind of settled down. I did guard duty, 24-hour shifts. Everybody did it as rotation. I only got orders to go home. So I volunteered to go on a cleaning team to Kuwait to clean our vehicles. And I was there for 30 days. We were 12-hour shifts, 12 on, 12 off. And we had to comply with environmental laws for each country. We had inspectors come and inspect our stuff to make sure there's no dust, debris, blood, bullet casings, or whatnot. So we got caught up, and we were given the night off by our acting command that went with us to Kuwait. It was 2 separate. It was a first lieutenant and a sergeant. So it was New Year's Eve. Didn't have any civilian clothes. I went to the PX because I was invited to a party by a female. And I went. I was drugged, beat, raped. When I woke up, or came to, I didn't know where I was. I was confused. And I went to combat support hospital came later. I went to what would be like not a hospital, it's a clinic. Went to the clinic, and my pants were ripped. My nose had blood, still had blood in it. And I'm like, I told him, I said, I think I was raped. So then in 2004, there was none of this restricted, unrestricted. You were made to go through a rape kit. They called CID. CID said, okay, transport her to Combat Support Hospital for a rape kit. From the timeline of when I arrived at 11 o'clock and the timestamps on the document that the doctor was filling out, my rape kit was nearly 7 hours. I went through forensic photographing, scraping, everything. X-rays, my shoulder was messed up. It was a nightmare. So then from there, things were going on in the background that I wasn't aware of. I was sat at a table with the CID investigating officer. He interrogated me for an additional 6 hours. So by the time I got to the area that they wanted me in, I had been awake, I want to say, almost 13 hours after rape. At the end of the day, I was told that I was a liar and that I made it up.
So not only do you have to go through all of that and be deficient of sleep, now you have to try to make sense of the possibility that they're calling you a liar. Not even the possibility, but they're verbally calling you a liar.
Yes.
Insanity.
Very much. There was things that went on that I didn't know about. But I did know that I was allowed to request a court-martial. And I did. Every legal control that was there was violated. And that's worse than what happened to me that night. And they picked me apart like people pick apart chicken wings that have bone in it. That's how they picked me apart. And all that was left, literally, was bone and the tendons that keep the chicken together. That's what they did to me. And for that reason, I struggle with law enforcement badly. I don't trust them.
Sure, and rightfully so.
So
you get through the interview, the long interview.
Yeah, there was the female who invited me to the party. She heard that I was raped, but not for me. CID put me in some kind of place that was in a mall, and I remember it. And they had me working in a bookstore till they could find the people who did it. When you read my investigation, the report of investigation that was given to my command, that was given to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Originally, they believed me, but then when they started talking to my command said, she's a troubled soldier. Don't believe her. She has a rehab transfer. I hold all the paperwork to everything. And so the documents that I'm assuming that they say are missing are documents maybe that I have that were never put in my file. And it's a very extensive battle of profiling.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the female said that I approached her in a gym in Zone 2 and told her everything that happened. The attack took place in Zone 6, and out of curiosity, I FOIA'd from Central Command that map, Camp Ershon in Kuwait. There were 6 zones, and the only places that had gyms during that time were Zone 1 and Zone 6. Zone 2 was all the way at the other side. CID didn't even have me there, so they didn't question the validity of her statement. They didn't investigate it. They just went with what she said and said, this girl contradicts everything that I said in my statement. They never investigated it. So then they called me back in, and by this time I was already back with my unit, and they were like, look, we know you lied. Make another statement. And I just remember sitting there, and he guided me on what to say. So he was asking me questions, and then you read the answers to it in the statement. And you can see that. So after many, many years, when it finally came ahead, when I found out that Joni Ernest was the commander of my attacker, and a man, I don't want to get him in trouble, he still works for CID. They had a forensic handwriting expert go over my statement, and they said that those statements were written under duress, and that if I had been given the court-martial that I asked for, all of that would have come out, and I would have never been convicted. I would have been allowed to stay in the military. Which
is probably the biggest reason why they didn't grant you that opportunity.
Exactly. I remember when I went back to Balad, I was humiliated. There's no privacy in the military. None. Only if you're the perpetrator. Only if you're the one who did something wrong. So when I came back, people were saying, ooh, she doesn't look like she was raped. And I mean, warrant officers, some of them are married, some of them are not, fraternization and whatnot. It's very common in the military, especially the Army. And they're hitting on me, and then they're like, one of the warrant officers came up to me and they're like, hey, did you really have sex with somebody? And then say you were raped because you were late for work. And I just stood there and I started crying. And I'm like, no. I said, that's not true. And so I came from Kuwait back to Balad, and my first sergeant, he assaulted me. He jerked me off the transportation I was on. And I was with my first lieutenant from Kuwait, and he screamed at me in front of this lieutenant, and he said, you're going to pay for what you've done. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. Please stop. And I'm screaming for for the lieutenant, and I'm like, please help me. He just turned around and walked off. When I got to my tent, my first sergeant said, go to bed. There's lots of work to be done. My cot was catty-cornered in front of my whole squad. So not only did they violate my privacy, but they isolated me. And so I just laid there. I faced the other side of the tent, and I went to sleep for a few hours, but I went to sleep crying. And then I got up, and some really close buddies I had, they told me that battalion told everyone that I was worthless and I was a liar and that they were going to get rid of me for good. So then after that, they followed the counseling. They're like, you're being put out of the military because you're accused of violating General Order 1A, which is consuming alcohol. And Kuwait, is forbidden. You're not allowed. And then they said, so because I was raped and CID said that I wasn't, they charged me with not being at my proper place of duty. They tacked on what CID said, that I made a false statement twice and swearing to a false statement. They said, how do you want to proceed? And I said, I want an attorney. So that day, I was made to stand outside of their command. So command, they have their own attorney. And then there's Jack, okay? So I was sent to their attorney. I was made to stand outside of the door. All of these things, it's not clicking. I'm thinking this is normal. I don't know anything. And so I'm standing outside the door, and then I go in. I was told by my command, go ahead, you can go in. So this man, he's an attorney, and he's still practicing in the U.S. And I sat down, and he's like, look, I can't help you. Sign whatever they give you. And I was like, oh, God. He gave me his name, his DSN, and his email. So then another set of paperwork came to me, and it says, how do you want to proceed? I said, I want an attorney. I want a court-martial. The only paperwork that made it out is that I want an attorney. The court-martial paperwork was destroyed.
Of course it was.
So I was having a hard time. They took my weapon, and you have to know how Balad is. Balad was very, very active. It was just very active with attacks, mortars, RPGs. They're putting the QRF, which is the Quick Reaction Force, in the middle of the night because while we're trying to sleep, people are trying to kill us. This is real. I'm not making it up. We lost helicopters, pilots, crew chiefs. We went through all that. I went through all of that. And then I didn't have a weapon to defend myself. So I went to my command and I said, please, can I go to the psychiatrist? And they looked at me and they said, no. CID said nothing happened. You don't need a psychiatrist. So mental health was denied.
And especially as, just to add some points there, as lower enlisted, when you're in the military, you follow orders, and if you're not in trouble, you're not going to know certain procedures and what your rights are and all that. So if you're trying to keep your nose clean and you get shoved into this situation, you don't know what your options are, and you have no choice but to trust those that are supposed to represent you.
Exactly.
And you do as you're told. Also want to touch on, because you had mentioned that you, not only the malaria medication and the traumatic brain injury from the explosion, but that you were actually participating in the burn pits often. You were burning human waste, but you were also handling the JP5 and constantly having to go to the burn pit. This just wasn't one occurrence. This was at least once a week, correct?
Yes, it was. It was me and my sergeant, and I remember it. The 510 truck. That's kind of equivalent to civilians' dump truck, basically.
Right.
And we would load stuff onto it, and me and him, I would be on one side looking for insurgents, and he would be driving. Because you had to drive on the perimeter where our vehicle is. Maybe 3 feet was hostile territory. So you had to look, and we get to the burn pit, and there's a line. You have to wait. There's a line of people. Smoke is everywhere. I didn't know anything. I don't even think my sergeant did either. His face wasn't covered, but he was Filipino. He was he was a good sergeant, but one of the very few that I met. So when it was our turn, some of the area you were driving on had already been burned, and then you would back it up, and it was almost like a ravine. And he would stand in the top, and he would hand me the debris, and I'm the one who had to throw it because. If you're not an E4 or better to the military, you're expandable and you're useless and they don't care. So that's what I was. I was lower than an E4. So I did that, hop back in the vehicle, and then we were gone.
So, yeah,
and I had to do that. I had to do that every week.
And the burn pits have been in the news for killing lots of veterans because of their exposure, because at the time nobody thought that precautions needed to be taken. And fast forward, a couple of years, and all of a sudden there's these mysterious illnesses that veterans have that are killing them rapidly and also affecting their offspring as well because of their exposure and because of having to take the malaria medication and so forth. Another point also, so that everybody understands what extra duty is. Extra duty refers to once you fulfill your work day, which may end. So as a cook, they have to get up a lot earlier because they have to be able to prepare breakfast for the troops when they get up. And then their work day may be done by, let's say, 1600. This is 4 p.m. Just for sake of argument. Extra duty will begin, say, at 1700 at 5 p.m., but only last until 2000, which is 8 p.m., or depending on the jobs that are needed to be done, but they don't exceed much past that. So by them actually taking it upon themselves and expanding the extra duty hours, all it's doing is beating you down. And it's a common practice that happens to make sure the lower ranks or those that are in trouble know their place in the big chop chain. So what they were doing to you was over and above what they ever should have done.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Oh yeah, extra duty doesn't mean they get to work you until they feel it's done, because since they put you on extended, it's not like extra duty for one day. You got extra duty assigned to you as part of what they consider punishment, and so that means every day you get done working, you're gonna do 2, 3, 4 hours, and then that's it, which gives you plenty of time to shower and get to bed and get up and start your day over again. And that's why they use it as a punishment. So they're basically, it's a work camp, but anything past that point is definitely excessive.
Well, I can tell you this. One of the structures I had to tear down, we had a lot of work that day. So we have to fill sandbags. There's not really rain out there, but there is moisture. And so the sandbags lessen the impact of the RPG and the mortar fire. And so we've got, just in our own section, we had about 11 tents. And those 11 tents, the sandbags had to be 6 high. It had to go all the way around. So we were filling sandbags. And I remember one night, and there's witnesses to it, and a lot of the witnesses are still alive. They put portable lights for me to work. When everybody else was taking break time, shower time, talking to their family, I didn't even get to talk to my family. I was literally isolated and cut off. And I thought, well, if I didn't plan on assaulting him. When I went in my tent, my first inclination, I loaded my weapon sitting on my cot, and I put my weapon up to my chin. I'm going to blow my head off. Maybe if I'd have done that, then I would have been spared all this other stuff. Because now it's just gotten to the point where it's really hard, like really hard. I don't know how to explain this to my daughters. I talked to my husband about it, and these are the things that break me, because I'm like, how can they do this? And it's okay with them. So they did. They put portable lights out there. And the commanding sergeant major that was in charge, he was there, but he was hard. And he was our replacement, because the other sergeant major we had, lower enlisted lady, was providing oral sex in a combat zone. So she got to stay, and he got moved. And then that's how we got Buddy Wallace. And so once again, we're at where the military doesn't consistently enforce its own rules, policies, and whatnot. So when I was building the fence, he made me take it out because one of the poles, the wooden poles that I had to put in the ground, it wasn't even. So I had to redo it. So it was things like that. And I mean, I wrote him a few years later, because he told me, he said, if you ever need things, he's like, I'll be here to help you. And he admitted in the email to my command overworking, and that when it was brought to his attention, it was corrected, but it was 40 days into it before he found out. And then he said that my command and CID said that I was not right. And he listed all the charges that they charged me with. And it was the same thing that was in the charging document. So basically, they circumvented CMJ by not allowing a court-martial. And it's kind of like somebody resigning in lieu of criminal charges, basically.
Right, so they can't be touched.
Exactly. But I was already touched more than once, so it didn't matter.
Right.
And so I left Balad, and I went back to Giebelstadt, Germany, and E5 was put over me. I had to go through out processing. The military made me give back everything that they had ever given me. I had war trophies, things that I had found One of them was a really nice knife, probably illegal in the U.S., but nevertheless, it was so nice. So that was taken, and they were like, well, this will lower your bill with the Army. And I'm like, bill? And so that's later on down the line. I went to the media. I went to the AP and at battalion or brigade level, and one of the men was a major, and he told me I was called in, and he told me, he said, if I find out you go to the media again, he says, I will court-martial you, and not based on your right, pin me against the wall inside brigade. So because I tried to reach out to the press for help, after that, until it was time for me to go on the 31st of January, I had to report every hour on the hour, 24 hours a day. So by the time I left, I was extremely sleep deprived. I had been operating off of Red Bull, and I went to sleep on the plane that got me back to the U.S. And then after that, the military submitted my record. I found out later my whole investigation, minus the medical evidence that proved right, was given to the VA.
So the VA gets their report, and which should include everything that's said, not key factors, everything. And that's the only way that the VA would be able to evaluate what the proper application of a rating would be for what they're reviewing. So, and that's very important, because when we're in the military, the one thing we don't do is we don't run to the medical department every time we have an ache or pain.
Exactly.
So that ends up screwing us in the end. However, it's vitally important when you have such an experience as you went through, and you're kind of relying on, hey, the process should work, and you find out that they only received the report, but they didn't get any of the medical evidence.
No, and I remember was like, because I didn't go to sick call for hardly anything. I was sent to combat support hospital, and since nobody can actually see me say this, I don't mind saying it, because of my diet and because of the things that I had to do. I had blood clots in my rectum, and so if they didn't remove it, it could have caused serious damage. So I had to go through that 5 times, and my command, because they didn't know I was suffering from blood clots in my rectum, they wrote me up for that. And there was a girl who was crying. She was coming from her command's tent, and I asked her what was wrong. She said, the military's putting me out for malingering. And I'm like, what is the malingering? And then later I learned malingering is when you go to sick call too much. And I was like,
Right.
Yeah, so like I never did that. And I only waited to go because I suffered like extensive recurrent respiratory infections. I'd never had anything like that before, ever. And I didn't put it together. I'm burning human waste in a metal drum, and then the dust, and then the burn pits. I'm young. I don't know. And then it was the anthrax crap, and go get your shot. Then no, don't get your shot. There's a state order. Now come get your shot. And it was all this mess. And I went to sick call 5 times over my lungs. But at that point, I was wheezing, coughing up blood, chills.
And it wasn't just human waste. It was JP8, which is aviation fuel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. And so, and I was the one who had to pour it. No face mask, no protective gear. You can't use your gas mask for that because the filters in it are one-time use only. So you have to sit there and you have to watch it burn. And there were 2 drums. They're giant. And it's for everybody to waste in. So I'd burn one while other people would use the other one. And then I used the glove, and I had to drag it back and put it back underneath these. They're like makeshift porta potty. And then I'd have to bury like a little brick, pretty much, in the desert with my e-tool, which is basically military shovel. Right. And then I covered it up, and I did that for over about 300 days. 300 give or take.
Right. Yeah, that's especially long-term exposure. There's nothing good that came from that, and that's evident in today's news with the amount of veterans that have respiratory issues, heart issues, circulatory issues, have already died. Their offspring are affected, and so forth. And unfortunately, a lot of these veterans that they're finding out now that had an exposure to the burn pits, and because of what they were forced to do while they were in, that was detrimental to their health overall long term. It's too late for a lot of veterans today because they've already passed away.
Yes, and all that data is
Same.
So that bothers me a great deal. And when I was in Florida, I became homeless. I applied for benefits through the VA, Bay Pine. I'm guessing that's the regional office, or St. Pete or something like that. But yeah, I was homeless, and I didn't get their rating decision. So the rating decision came back with, yeah, you're a liar. And CID said that all of your statements that you wrote were proven to be false. You were kicked out of the military because of this, and your discharge is not honorable. It's misconduct. Before I applied, the Army Discharge Review Board, they were the first people that ever reviewed my case. So it went to them. The application was dated January 3rd. And then after that, me and my husband got married. We went to North Carolina. I had my daughter. And then my husband ended up getting a job offer in Alabama. So when we got to Alabama, I asked for help. I was breaking out in rashes. My fingers, my hands were turning purple, blue. I didn't know why, and it hurt. But like needles were in my finger. My shoulder was still giving me a fit. So the VA's like, yeah, you know something? There's nothing wrong with your shoulder. You told the doctor in Kuwait that your shoulder was better. So I'm like, what? And I was baffled at them saying that. So I requested my entire military personnel file. The personnel file only had the statements, my statement. It had all the charges from CID on it. It had all the witness statements and the statement of my attacker. And I was devastated. Everything that I read, I had no memory of. I learned from the statements that I was in a tent and that I was raped 3 more times. There's no memory. And then after a while, I remember at the initial attack point, they hit me in my face, and my head slammed down on his bunk. I remember that vaguely, and that was the biggest part of me that was hurting, was my head and my shoulder. So the VA's like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with your shoulder. When I finally got the document, the tech didn't give the actual film. They gave a summary, and they wrote that my right shoulder is normal. It wasn't my right shoulder, it was my left one. I fought with the VA until 2008. I couldn't take the pain anymore. I couldn't even lift my second daughter. I couldn't lift milk or even a 5-pound bag of sugar, and I wasn't fat either. I was still within my military weight. So me and my husband, we hired a civilian bone guy, and we took him the x-rays from the VA, and he's sitting there with us, and he's like, this is not normal. And he showed where my AC joint was separated from my clavicle, and so that's why it had been hurting so bad.
Sure, and rightfully so.
So he did an MRI, and they found where I had an infection in the back of my shoulder, because the VA wouldn't treat it, because the cops, so innocent, said nothing happened.
Yeah, and that was 2008 was also the same year that VA had told you that the Army said it was consensual sex. So sexual trauma claim was denied. They denied you your claim of sexual trauma because of the Army saying, no, she said it was okay.
Yep.
So that's insane.
And I didn't learn till later that the director only copied what Florida said.
Right.
Because I'm very vocal, and I kept complaining. I wouldn't shut up. I'm like, you can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. I was turned down for sexual trauma counseling, retreats, places that would help me process what I went through. But the doctor said, those spots are reserved for confirmed cases of rape. And I drove all the way back from Montgomery to Dothan, bawling my eyes out. And I did. I wanted to kill myself because I thought, I still have to prove this, seriously? I wrote the Army Discharge Review Board, and I'm like, did you make a decision? Well, when I was homeless, they did make a decision, and they remailed it to my house. And that's when I learned that they cited that my command did violate my right, and that the discharge and the reason for separation was incorrect. They went all the way back to January 31st, 2004, and gave me a brand new discharge, not an upgrade. That's important to distinct the difference. They gave a brand new one, effective from the time I left the military. If a soldier asks for a discharge to be changed for misconduct or anything other than a court-martial, if the Army or whatever board decides, okay, they were in war, we're going to have mercy on them, we're going to give them an upgrade, and it's going to be a DD Form 215. But I was given a brand new DD 214. The VA, they never honored it. As a matter of fact, they waited all the way to 2015 to correct it in the system, and that's a problem.
Which allows them to refuse your treatment.
That's right, yes.
So it's
So,
double jeopardy, and it never works
wow.
to the advantage of the veteran.
No, it doesn't. So me and my husband, we left Alabama, and then that's when I came to Oklahoma City. By that time, the VA's own doctors screened me for traumatic brain injury. They determined that I had traumatic brain injury due to sexual assault, and they said that I need MRIs. But the man in charge of benefits said no MRI. So I blacked out behind my SUV, and I was sent to a neurologist. I was diagnosed with complex partial seizures, and I was given medicine to try to control it. I was put on Topamax originally. When I get to Oklahoma City VA, they're like, yeah, no, we don't believe that, doctor. We're taking you off Topamax. We're going to do our own testing. So I went through three or four more Gs. All of them were abnormal, every last one of them. So the next step was going to be an EEG telemetry in Wisconsin. But this one would be different. It's called brain mapping EEG, where they try to pinpoint the exact location of the seizure, see if surgery is an option. Because even while taking Topamax, before they took me off, I was still having seizures, sharp spikes followed by a small wave, followed by no activity, and then up again, and then down, and then, it was all in my records. And they're like, she needs help. One day, I'm sitting at home, and I get a call, and I'm told, Miss Dunnefield, we're sorry, but we've discovered that you're really not a veteran. What? I'm not a veteran? No, you didn't serve long enough. You're not service connected. Your discharge is still for misconduct. So we're going to have to terminate care. And they did it.
Which doesn't surprise me with lots of the lowdown tactics that they have, which is another reason why our conversation is so vitally important, because if it doesn't make the news, everybody thinks the VA is supporting the veterans and doing everything possible to help them out, when in reality, exactly what you said, hey, we're not going to take what your doctor said and what the testing showed, because we don't believe it. So we're going to do our own testing. And what that equates to is we're going to find somebody that's going to write it up the way we want to see it, so that way we can deny you any further disability ratings or support. I've experienced it personally, so I know this to be a fact. This isn't just somebody that's mad because of what the military did, which it is bad enough as it is, and then you come out into the civilian sector being told that the VA is going to take care of you, so don't really worry about it, and the VA spits on you. It's important to note that. So you went to the Oklahoma VA, and they're telling you, since CID came back and said it wasn't rape, we don't have to treat you, and they had rejected your rape case, stating that the CID report said it wasn't rape. So they took that and ran with it because it benefited their agenda of denying you any sort of support.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is. And what?
So they've allowed the VA to cancel any future appointments because they're saying you weren't technically a veteran.
Yeah.
That's not right.
And the thing is that they did. I have to keep all this paperwork because I'm afraid of them. They've made me afraid of them.
Of course.
And the things that they've said, the things that they've done. And, I'm pretty extreme. And to some instance, which is probably why I have all this paperwork. And I fought like hell. I did, I swear. So I sat there, I cried about it, composed myself, and I'm like, I have to be in the best health that I can because I have kids. The VA, in my case, they use your kids as leverage against you.
Sure.
So you have to walk very softly. You don't want to piss them off too much because then they use whatever resources they have available to them to harm you further. And what I mean by that, so I went to, there's a public law that was passed way before this. And the law said that if you suffered sexual trauma, the VA is required by law to treat any and all injuries related to sexual assault. I brought that. And I brought it was 5 pages of cognitive defects with reasoning, my memory. My reasoning's got a little bit better, but my memory is worse. And I brought that to them. I'm like, you can't do this. They already canceled all traumatic brain injury appointments. They canceled everything for Wisconsin, like everything. And I had the paperwork. So I learned through the Health Eligibility Center, every single veteran in America, when they apply for health care, they go through that system. I call it the HEC in Atlanta. So the Health Eligibility Center they tell the VA that the veterans allow treatment. Their boss is the Department of Veterans Affairs Benefits. The VA doesn't view healthcare as a right. They view it as a benefit. Therefore, the VBA is the one that has exclusive jurisdiction over that. And considering how they treated me before for service connection, they're 90% of the reason why. So when I talked to a gentleman that was number 2 before he left to go to the civilian sector. And he told me, he's like, Oklahoma City VA knew what they were doing was retaliatory. He said before all that happened, he said every time the VA gives a denial, they have to extend appeal right. So they took all my health care away and they waited 2.5 months to give me appeal right, but it didn't come from the Health Eligibility Center. It came from Orlando VA and it came from a lawyer. So they also circumvented my rights. And, the people that did that, some of them are still employed there. That bothers me a lot.
Sure.
And so I found out that I went to them because I was on the verge of being homeless. When the VA took away my health care and I tried to fight them on it, they cited in my medical records that CID said it was consensual sex and that I'm not allowed any medical treatment, period. And you can see the doctors and administrators arguing back and forth through my record, saying we know something, even if they said that she's still eligible for mental health. You can't take that away from her.
Right.
So I was put in mental health, and then I requested a service connection for traumatic brain injury and hearing loss. The VA came back with TBI is denied because the rape in question does not exist, and you're just a cook. You can't have hearing loss.
You're right. Yeah, I find that comical that
Okay.
that they use those excuses.
So alert the Taliban really quick.
Right.
So I was facing eviction. I went to them for help for housing, right? And they wrote in my file, she's not a veteran. She's not eligible for any housing. And so they mailed the letter when they knew I was already evicted. It's written all through my file. And so, yeah, I couldn't take it anymore. And so I tried to kill myself. I ended up in ICU, and then I was kicked out. I was kicked to the curb because they said I wasn't a veteran, and I maxed out my eligibility for help.
So because they decided to put a timeline on when they feel you should be all better, or as long as they're getting paid, they said, nope, okay, so your time's done. Time for you to go.
Yes. So from that time until October of 2012, I went without health care. And I didn't know. I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know.
Right.
So when me and Sean, I got health care back. But then they said, her EEGs are abnormal, but she's making them abnormal. She's fake. So we're back to, it's all in your head. There's nothing really wrong with you.
Well, and it also supports their narrative because they're reading the reports where CID is saying, oh, she lied on her statements and this is why she's getting booted. And so they get to use that excuse as their golden egg. Hey, see, it was proven that she lied before, so she must be lying now. So let's just say that that's what she's doing. That way we can easily just reject her and she won't have any sort of leg to stand on for an appeal, which is sick. It's sad that that's what they do because it's quite obvious that they don't have a soul.
No, they don't. And they don't care. When my reports were leaked to me, they were not redacted. So I found out who all the witnesses were. That's how I found out who one of the attackers was. And that's how I found out who Joni Ernest was. And I have their name, their socials, their date of birth. I have all that in a secure location because I don't want anybody to get it and exploit it. She's a sitting United States senator. And that could be, I don't want her to get hurt or anything like that. I don't understand her actions. So I learned later that the statements that she took, they're not sworn. And that matters because sworn statements is what she used in court. She had unsworn statements, and the report of investigation states that she interviewed the men before CID could.
Which is unethical.
It is. Could you imagine, so I voted for President Obama. Could you imagine the outrage and the outcry that there would be if one of his people raped someone and then he walked into a crime scene and said, hey, I want a statement from everyone that was in here that knew what happened to use it to clear their employee.
Right.
Or if you're a Republican on the other side, what outcry would there be? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. No, I agree with you.
They're saying that it's legal, but maybe not ethical. But
well, you were going to file some due process violations, and the VA destroyed evidence.
Yes, they did. because of them. So they got the statements that Senator Ernest took, and they used that to make a decision about me, which is wrong.
It is wrong.
It's profiling. It's the worst kind of profiling ever. And just to be clear to anyone that's listening, I am a Caucasian female. I just turned 40, so this shouldn't be about, I just want to make that clear that I'm Caucasian female. Because some people are like, well, that doesn't matter. It does matter because it happens to everybody. That's my point.
Yep.
So, yes, I filed service connection for my butt that I got needles in all the time downrange. So they gave me the maximum that they could give me, which is 30%. And that's what made me eligible for health care. So Senator Lankford was a sitting congressman then. And I had went to them and I told them everything that happened. His office wrote CID and said, give me everything that you have. Well, we found out that the reason why the medical records weren't included with the agent's investigative report is because the government put all those medical records in Fort Sam. So when someone is assaulted and they opt for a rape kit, that's not sent to CID or the Air Force or whoever's investigating it. That goes to another location. And they're not telling people that. That's when we got the forensic photos that showed forcible rape. We got medical documentation during the rape kit. They're pulling chunks of blood out of my nose. I have bruising everywhere. My pants are all messed up. They have holes in them from them being ripped. I had hand marks around my arms from where they held me down. But that's to them, to the VA, it's consensual.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And so I had nobody, and so I did it on my own. I prayed. I'm like, God, please help me do this. So because those statements were leaked to me, I created a timeline that went against CID's recommendation that nothing happened. The conflicting statements, the times that were missing. My attacker at the time was higher ranking, desk fraternization. He was also married. The statements that CID made said that they recommended to Senator Ernest to charge him with drinking, even though you could prove fraternization, you can prove that he was married, which is adultery. So if it's so consensual and the Army's equal, then why wasn't he charged with that?
Right.
So, yeah, he's in Minnesota now, and he has a Purple Heart, and he retired at the rank of an E6. The only good thing I can say about it is that Congress didn't let him go any further than that.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, didn't the VA also go into the system, went in there and deleted raw data so they could say that you were not having seizures, even though you've got paperwork showing that they diagnosed you with having seizures?
Yes, and I don't even mind giving her name. Her name is Physician Assistant Shannon Thomas, a.k.a. Shannon Mosier. She's still employed by Oklahoma City VA, making a six-figure salary in the traumatic brain injury clinic. When I saw her after my health care was taken away, she wrote in my records that there was a problem with my eligibility, that I wasn't a veteran, but I'm now back. By this point, I had developed migraines with auras. I was put on migraine prophylactic. One of the doctors there, very smart fellow, I like him a lot. He's just a really good doctor. He's like, yeah, we're going to put you on the max of Topamax. I was given other medicine to control the migraines because they were debilitating. Sometimes I would have them for 3 days. And so in 2013, I was sent to DeBakey Medical Center. The doctor there is named Dr. Chen. He is not a neurologist. He's the nerve guy that sticks needles in you. And yeah, that's what his job is. So I was sent there for an EEG telemetry. He lied to me and said that there were no events, nothing has happened. But then the staff came back and told me, you had 3 events during sleep deprivation. And I knew it because I could feel it when I woke up in the morning from fatigue and how tired I was and the headache that came with it. And so Shannon Mosier went into my record. She said that I did not show up for DeBakey and that I did not show up for prolonged EEG at Oklahoma City VA, despite the fact that I have the record that shows that I went to both. They captured a very strong seizure where my tongue was moving. And yeah, I remember that. So I didn't even know she destroyed my stuff until I came to Orlando. Sean got a job with the Legion.
Which let me just add, by the way, that anyone that goes in and deliberately destroys or deletes documented any wording on an assessment or an opinion, medical opinion on a patient is illegal. It's not just highly frowned upon. It is actually illegal, but yet it happens, and accountability is not that big of a deal when it comes to VA. which shows how big of a battle the veterans have to face when they get out, because they have not only, well, like in your case, you got to battle the fact that you know what the truth is, and now the tests are supporting exactly what you said, despite everybody trying to just call you a liar so they can sweep it under the rug easier. So it makes it easier on them. And when they're put in check, that's when facts start to appear, and that's when people start to sweat.
Yes,
It's insane.
Yes, it is. So when we got to Orlando, I had my youngest daughter.